I'm different mentality. I'm born from crazy mountains.
Hi fight fans, and welcome to another video. Imagine you are a martial artist, dedicating your life to this sport, training hard in blood and sweat every day, and dreaming of becoming a UFC fighter. Then your phone rings, and your manager tells you the good news. The UFC management is interested in signing you to the promotion. Good news, right? This is what you've been training for all your life. This is the highest level of competition, the most elite MMA organization in the world. But soon after, your moment is bittersweet when you realize your first opponent is a Russian wrestler coming out of Dagestan. Just another fight, right? You've already been there and you have fought many wrestlers before, but something is telling you that this fight might be different, and this fighter would bring something to the table that no other opponent previously has. You are probably not wrong, considering that the Dagestani fighters dominate the MMA stage today. Why are these fighters coming out of that part of Russia so excellent and dominant? What's the secret weapon they use in their fights? And how have they become so feared in the UFC today? Let's analyze and take a closer look at this. The way of life and training in Dagestan. When Khabib said that he is coming out of crazy mountains, he wasn't joking. And if you can define the Dagestani natural environment in one word, that would be harsh. People here are built differently, and their cardio is usually off the scales. Have you ever been hiking? If so, did you notice that the further you go up, the harder you breathe and the more tired you are, but then you returned home and your life went back to normal? What if I told you that hiking is not considered a sport or activity in Dagestan, but simply living? What if I told you that what we call hiking, the Dagestani people refer to as walking? The Dagestan area covers 25,500 square kilometers, and the average height of the entire territory of this Russian state is 960 meters, or about 3,149 feet above sea level. And with that, a tough place to hike even if you are an experienced climber. However, it's hard for those who live in everyday environments. Still, these mountain people born in Dagestan have adapted to living here, and training in such harsh conditions is just another day in the office for them. Besides the obvious environmental factors and cold winters, Dagestan is a harsh place with endless conflicts between Russian forces and radical militants. Certain types of violence are just a way of life there. Dagestan is a region that values combat sports, and societal expectations play a significant role in enticing Dagestani men to train in wrestling. Dagestani culture values fighters just like Austria values classical music performers. For example, if you are a healthy male, the Dagestani mindset is that you should be wrestling, as wrestling is deeply implemented in their genes. Otherwise, as Khabib told Tony Ferguson, they would eat you in a street fight. Not saying that babies in Dagestan who were unfit to wrestle were abandoned on the nearby hillside like in ancient Sparta, but to be able to live in such a mountainous region requires strong genes. Considering that most of the Dagestanis are devoted Muslims, they are not partying or even less drinking alcohol, but rather train all day long. They would wake up early in the morning, go hiking, and run across unforgiving mountain terrain. The harsh conditions contribute significantly to Dagestani fighters being both tough and powerful wrestlers and mentally strong. At such high altitudes, everyone not born and raised there breathes deeper and faster because of the difference between atmospheric pressure at altitude and sea level. The air in those mountains is thin, and the less oxygen available, the thinner the air. Have you seen Khabib Nurmagomedov tired in a fight? Neither have I. Once you get used to training at such high altitudes, you develop cardio that is off the scales, and training or fighting at average sea level becomes much more straightforward. Just by living in this part of Russia, an average Dagestani person develops the physical abilities of an active climber. Living there would make you faster, a better athlete, get your feet moving quicker, and help strengthen your arms, back, shoulders, core, and legs. All of those environmental factors, combined with Dagestani athletes' unique training, make them invincible in whatever combat sports they compete in. By the way, if you've enjoyed our videos so far, please press the like button. Most successful Dagestani fighters in the UFC: Khabib Nurmagomedov, Islam Makhachev, and Magomed Ankalaev are all well-known names in the MMA community. There are just a few of the many. Nevertheless, other UFC fighters like Ali Bagotanov, Umar and Usman Nurmagomedov, Zabit Magomed Sharapov, and many others coming out of this region are also worth mentioning. Speaking of Khabib, is there a more dominant champion in the history of the UFC? He has never even bled in a fight, much less lost a bout, and some even believe that he's never even lost a round, making Chael Sonnen smoke nervously in the corner. Currently, the UFC has another dominant champion, Islam Makhachev. He became the UFC champion by beating the most feared grappler in the whole UFC, the one who holds the record for the most submissions and most finishes in UFC history, Charles Oliveira. It's not only about how he beat him, but how he did it. He literally defeated him in his own game, submitting him on the ground. At the light heavyweight division, another top contender, Magomed Ankalaev, possesses everything to become an undisputed, long-reigning champion in the UFC. The most successful MMA fighter from this region is undoubtedly Khabib Nurmagomedov, and people usually wonder, what training does Khabib do in Dagestan? If you know Khabib, you have probably seen that old video where he wrestled a bear when he was only a child, and that shows just how much people in this region value wrestling. In youth, Khabib and his teammates would wake up from their sleep very early in the morning and kickstart their training exercise with intense sprints up a mountain with immediate effect. The training involved him and his partners engaging in exercises such as sprints, squats, pull-ups, and a bit of weightlifting up the Dagestani mountain far above sea level. As previously said, these high-altitude training methods will be even more effective as the air will be thinner, meaning the training is even more grueling than it may first appear. Such an activity like this is undoubtedly not for nerds and virgins. In such training, Khabib would do some pad work with a training partner, even though he mainly focused on Sambo and wrestling. He knew that to beat all the elite fighters in the UFC, it is always essential in mixed martial arts to have a varied skill set. Training like this does not require a sophisticated gym, just the earth and the will of man. No surprise, we rarely see a Dagestani fighter gassing out in the octagon. There's a video of Khabib insanely swimming against a harsh, icy river in the mountains, as his friend records him and jokingly yells at him, "Davai, davai," which in Russian means, "let's go." That almost sounded like, "Hey guys, nothing out of the ordinary to see here, just a savage man swimming against an unforgiving icy river." One common sight in mixed martial arts recently, especially in the UFC, is the increasing number of Dagestani fighters, which leads to the question, why are Dagestani UFC fighters so dominant? The most important aspect of the sport of MMA is grappling. If you don't believe it, ask the former boxing champion James Toney, who fought only once in the UFC and was brutally dominated on the ground by the wrestler Randy Couture. The short answer to why Dagestani UFC fighters are so successful is that they are exceptionally gifted at wrestling, which has proven to be the core foundation and highly effective martial art in MMA fighting. As a result, the Dagestani fighters have an incredible winning rate of 89% in the UFC. The other martial art that Dagestani fighters train in is Russian Sambo. Sambo was created as a combination of the most effective martial arts today, Jiu-Jitsu, wrestling, and Judo, implementing the best techniques of each of these styles into one superior martial art of Sambo. Combat Sambo, on the other hand, besides grappling techniques, includes strikes and kicks as well, the closest you can get to a real MMA fight. That's the reason why Sambo fighters can quickly emerge and make a transition into MMA. When you combine Sambo and wrestling, you get the complete product of a deadly arsenal of vicious throws, sweeps, takedowns, and submissions, techniques that would make any UFC fighter run for his money. We've seen a lot of wrestlers in MMA, but not many of them could implement their game accordingly. If you study American and Russian wrestlers, you'll notice a significant difference in consistency. While the American style of wrestling prefers timing and opportunity to close the distance and shoot for the takedown, the Dagestani style of wrestling is a methodology where a fighter fluidly moves from one move to the next without thinking. The specific chain of wrestling is keeping your opponent on the back foot, constantly moving forward, and keeping the pressure by executing one takedown after another. If the first takedown attempt fails, a classic Dagestani wrestler would immediately shoot for another and another until he earns the dominant position where he prefers to be. Using the chain wrestling style, Dagestani wrestlers are experts at taking their opponents down and putting them on their backs. It's not only about executing a takedown, but the ability to control the angles while keeping the opponents down, holding them from a top position. And then again, one would ask, why are Dagestani fighters such great wrestlers? That's almost the same as asking why seals are also good at swimming, because swimming is all they did while growing up. Even though wrestling is not officially the national sport of Dagestan, kids in this part of Russia are raised to be wrestlers. And what do you guys think? Are the environmental factors in training the critical foundations of Dagestani's success in combat sports? Do you believe they will keep dominating the MMA stage in the future? Leave your thoughts in the comments. And if you'd like to watch more content like this, please make sure to like and subscribe.